Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's Alicia Brasher here at Cosmic Gateway. I am joined by the one and only, my dear, dear soul brother, Lachie. Thank you for being here once again. You may have seen him before with me doing some energy update videos at the beginning of the year and the end of last year. And this time we're doing something a little bit different. And thank you for accepting my offer, and thank you for being here to share your knowledge and wisdom and hopefully a bit of a funny conversation. So welcome.
Funny, I don't make jokes. I never make jokes. I'm the most humorless person there is.
So I'm just going to put a disclaimer in there for non-Australians perhaps, because, you know, we may throw in a bit of Aussie humour, so you might want to get your more Australian humour dictionaries out, if that's even a thing, and just roll with us, and maybe you might learn something about Australian culture. But I'm just going to put that in there because I don't know where this could possibly go. But a little bit of background, or actually, first of all, I'm going to paint the picture to this, because this will be the very first episode of many, and so I have felt guided to balance the scales. I've had many beautiful and amazing, and will continue to do so, female co-hosts and guests on, but now I'm bringing the boys in, bringing the bros in. Super excited about this because it's always a highlighted point, especially in a, can I say, a highly female dominated spiritual community, to want to better understand the male's vantage point, process, perception, you know, all those things. And I feel so incredibly lucky and honored to have you so close to me, you know, over so many years. And you have been my one go-to of, I need to work this out. I need to see this from a man's perspective. What is going on here?
I'm the token man.
So I guess this is a little bit of a real insight into my own personal life, and bringing people on who are near and dear to me, who have helped me in different aspects. But the bigger picture is that I'll be bringing in different men from all different backgrounds who have gone through their own, you know, awakening, ascension on their path, whether it's inspirational, whether it's, you know, in various different realms, just to, I guess, give a bit more of a platform to the men and the men that are evolving. And so maybe we can get some viewer input into, I haven't really settled on a name. I know Lachie and you and I have been, like, you know, back and forth.
Which was the favorite one? We had a couple going, which was Menergy work.
Menergy
work. Like that one.
Yes. So
and I just thought of another one just then. Many episodes.
Ooh, I like it. See? A man of many, many talents.
Pun intended.
And the one that came to me, but it was too long, it was like progression steps to men's evolutionary process. And I guess that's what it's going to showcase. But
Menvolution.
Menvolution. Oh man, we could just go all day.
We could riff. There could be so many riffs. This could be a multi-riff video.
It sure could be. But, so I guess that's the background. That's, you know, this is episode 1, and, you know, when I came to you, and I just want to say this has been years, absolute years in the making, because,
well, almost 20 years, really, hasn't it? And not a lot of people know this, but when Alicia was getting started in her, I suppose, career and learning and spiritual sort of things, I was her very first client.
Yeah.
I was struggling to put some issues behind me and get work, and I did a session with you. Literally the next day, I got a job offer. That was like, okay, maybe there's something to this after all.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, we really do go way back. There's so much history there, and we'll go into that a little bit. So I guess our friendship stems back almost 20 years. I'm not gonna put an exact time frame on it, but, you know, we can round it up to about that.
Yeah, which is surprising given that you know, you're only 21 and I'm 23.
Right.
That's, you know, we were just really good at this spiritual thing and started really early. Really.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. I know we're joking around, but there is a lot of truth
That
to
is
that.
true. That is
Because
true.
I know that as we've compared and shared stories over the years, you know, we joke about how, you know, you were, I had my different outlets, but you were in the library section is it the
The
000
section of
Yeah.
the library with the ghosts and the paranormal and UFOs and everything. I was like, oh my God. I loved it.
So in essence, I guess we had, well, I can't say we had similar upbringing, but similar interests, let's say that. And we've grown up in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, we didn't even cross paths until our early 20s. So,
Right.
you know, we came across doing in a local group doing capoeira. So, and so,
Good times.
yeah, that was the initial connection point. And then from there, I never forget though. I never forget when, I don't know if it was the first time we met. And I guess this really stands to reason like strong soul fam connections, because when we first met, where there was such a recognition, and we spent hours trying to map out like how we had met before.
That's right, yeah. Like running through almost like genealogy of, you know, you were friends with her, but she didn't go to that high school until 2 years later. It was really quite quite fun.
And we never came to anything. And then obviously as things progressed, we realized, well, obviously it's a soul recognition, and that's, you know, that's where some of the most beautiful and strong friendships come from. So
That's it.
so, you know, I couldn't ask for a better person to be the first cab off the rank in this, and obviously ongoing. I'm going to keep pulling you back, and we're going to sharing some cool stuff. But
really, it's going to be this video and then an apology video, much longer, for all the bad jokes and improper references and, you know, F words.
We're going to drop the F bombs.
We can't say that.
So I guess let's get into it. Do you want to share a little bit about like your progress and evolution and your like awakening? Like what was, if you go back, what were some of the first things that you started to dabble in and become really keenly interested in or studying? Because I know that you're an avid researcher and studier, and that's just how you tick. You're my facts man. When I need to know anything, you're the man.
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, I think this happens with a lot of people. Like, you start out as a kid knowing that there's something more, because knowing that there's something more than just, you know, the four walls of your house and, you know, school, job, whatever, whether that's through experiences or just sort of an instinct. And there's that sort of itch where you just want to sort of reach that. And not only sort of to explore that, but to, I suppose, make use of it. Or maybe this is just simply the whole masculine perspective. But for me, that was the big driving force, was to increase my agency. You know, as when I say agency, I mean sort of the things that you can do, whether that's you know, as a kid wanting to have psychic powers, or, you know, telepathy, or flying, or invisibility, all of which the 00 section of the library assured me that I could achieve.
Right.
And, you know, that captures the imagination, that captures the young man's spirit, which it did for me, obviously. So yeah, like you said, I read a lot, I research a lot. Pretty much most of my day is spent reading. If it's not reading, then I'm sleeping.
Because we do so much work in
I know. We'll have to get to that a bit later, but yes. So I started out sort of as a natural talent with a lot of things, for like just the basic psychic stuff. So you have flashes of visions with people, and then they go and say something, or you have a prophetic dream. I remember having quite a few out-of-body experiences when I was a kid. and it scared the hell out of me. I was like, this is very strange, and not really having that sort of support or that sort of understanding culture, you sort of develop fears and stuff around that, but it's still very memorable. Sort of with that as a background and a bedrock, I sort of had quite a normal upbringing till I was probably around 20-ish, 20, 21, 25, around that sort of thing. And sort of, you've finished uni, you've left home, and you're sort of trying to start to make it into the world. That's obviously a struggle and a challenge. And so that sort of brings you back to that little kid's mindset of, how can I start making things easier for me or better for me, or things like that. So that got me started in something called chaos magic. I'd heard about that from video games and from books and movies and things like that, and thought, oh, maybe this fits with a whole lot of beliefs and experiences that I've had already. So why not give it a try? And so I ended up doing that and reading a lot about it and getting stuck into it. I remember I did one really good ritual, and that gave me an opportunity and almost set me up for life. So that was a sort of a turning point in thinking, all right, this is the pathway, not so much the goal.
Right. So obviously very good and very tuned in or able to be able to work that type of, as you said, chaos magic. But I do have a question for you, and I've never asked you this. Do you think that you were tapping into past life gifts and talents there, and like memory?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think, and it wasn't so much a learned technique. I think it was like a resonance, like I've sort of worked with these things before, and that was like the first thing. Like, how you have an instinct to swim or an instinct to cling to a vine or something that we get from, being little monkeys. This is the same thing, you fall out of the tree, you start waving a wand and dressing up in weird robes.
I love the way you put that. We have instincts to swim, but your instincts was to create, magic. So Harry Potter style, I imagine.
Nice. Go on.
No.
I was going to say, it sounds like very, very nice when you say it like that, like it could be on a bumper sticker in an aging hippie's Subaru. My instinct is to create magic.
Oh, that can go into the business file over there. Sorry, nice. Continue. But for people who don't know the term chaos magic, do you want to sort of break that down a little bit, or give an example, or
yeah, for sure,
explain that a little bit better?
So, first, you need to kidnap a child. No, I'm joking. So chaos magic gets a very bad rap because obviously it's got the word chaos in its title, and obviously it's magic, so it's occult. Occult really just means hidden, and the chaos part is more about, it doesn't use things like 13th century grimoires and books, and there's no recipe for it. You have this framework where you say, all right, this action means this result. I perform this action, and therefore I get the result. And that's the sort of the fundamental part of it. And it wasn't until sort of years later that you realize what you're actually doing is very similar to law of attraction stuff.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah, you're basically creating a framework to engage the law of attraction, engage the universe on your behalf, and then pretty much get out of the way and just let it happen. So, having said that, of course, there's a lot of branches of chaos magic that do invoke, angels, demons, devils. You can take it very far, but you don't really need to.
Yeah, I imagine that it has a lot of branches. I was going to say tentacles. That sounds a bit dark, but
tentacles depends which ritual you're casting. You know, sometimes they climb out of the pot when you're stirring it with the rest of the coven. No, it's it's actually very sterile. It was me and some friends from America, and we're just literally doing it via internet. And because we're all nerds, we had our own little internet-based sort of nerd-based ritual structure that we used, where we're basing everything on computer terms. It's embarrassing. Oh my god, I can't believe I said that.
I love that, because we've often talked about how nerds are going to save the world. When you're looking at what's that? We're going to have to
put that on the pile.
Well, when you think at the times that we're living in, that everything is online and everything is about information wars and things like that. Well, really, it's people who have the expertise, because I know that your background is in like computer systems, cracking codes and doing all that. So really, without the wonderful people like yourself in the world, we wouldn't be progressing as quickly as what we are. So my thanks.
Nerds of the world, unite.
So, fast forward, like the chaos magic, where did that sort of progress you to? Was that like a stepping stone to another layer of learning and interest and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so that's sort of the success of that, and then the fact that I was really enjoying it really did push me forward. But so this is all sort of set against a background of I'm still reading about aliens, I'm still reading about telepathy, I'm still meditating, and this is all sort of very basic stuff. So I'm doing Vipassana meditation, and I'm doing it once a week or whatever. Funnily enough, it was the success in chaos magic that led me to sort of put it aside, because once you've got the result, well, what do I need it for anymore? Like, it's not an ongoing thing. It's just and so that sort of kicked me forward and sort of said, moved me towards sort of a more Eastern spirituality, I suppose you would call it. So there's that's actually quite common in the chaos magic sort of scene. There's two fellows that I was reading very much when I was younger, called Alan Chapman and Duncan Barford, and they took the very similar sort of thing, where they were the original sort of internet chaos magic guys with a blog with all sorts of open source recipes for this and that, really good stuff. But then they basically said, this is all really going in one direction, and that's towards spiritual awakening. And so funnily enough, in the Western spiritual tradition, so we're talking things like Aleister Crowley, Kabbalah, loads of sort of those sort of structured, more structured and unstructured sort of setups. There's always that end point. There's a point where you cross the abyss, or you face the dark denizen coronazon or whatever. And once you're past that, you attain something called knowledge of the holy guardian angel, knowledge and conversation, I think it's called. It's been years since I've sort of looked at it. But essentially what that means is that you've gone through the dark night of the soul, and you've faced your fears, you've beaten all the triggers, and you've come out the other side a far more connected and awakened individual. So sort of seeing where that path lay, I started studying and moving down that path, looking at very basic things like Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, the Hindu subculture called Advaita Vedanta, very much sort of focused on something called non-dualism, which is essentially oneness with everything around you. And I suppose just bringing it back to the reason we're here is that I did find that the structure of it all, and that the fact that you have a pathway, you have, you do this for X amount of time, you get that, really sort of appealed to that masculine setup, my masculine instincts as well too. And it's actually ironic because a day or so ago I was reading an article about by a woman complaining that there were so many males in spirituality and she felt overwhelmed by it all. And this is sort of in the non-dual and the traditional religious thing, and contrasting that with sort of the other sort of side of spirituality, which of course you're in, which is very much female dominated. So I think there's that structured and unstructured setup that it's really weird because it's very compartmentalized, isn't it? Like, there can be whole branches of spirituality that you just have no idea exist until you sort of see them, because until you're sort of engaged, it almost sounds like mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. And I was thinking, while you were sharing a lot of that, how incredible it is how you kind of were able to like dabble into different areas and get like a real rounded approach in what you were learning, and I guess, as we say about all religions or all belief systems, at the core of it, they all say, they all focus on the one thing, or they are a pathway that leads to that. But I think it's really beautiful to hear someone's journey and how, one thing led to the next, and, some very different and vast, but ultimately, it brings you into this really well-rounded, well-knowledged, very wise space.
There's a beautiful Zen saying where one monk was in a monastery and he couldn't read the scriptures, they were in a different language. So he says to the other monk, "Oh, can we get some translated text here?" And the other monk turned to him and said, "The sound of the rain needs no translation." And that sort of seems to go into the fact that there's a core of truth in a lot of things, and it's that truth that doesn't need translation because it's there regardless, and that's what you have to focus on. I think that's what, I suppose, starting in the Western tradition really taught me, because it's very ad hoc. It's very roll your own spirituality, and you get the important stuff first. Case in point, I think the Bible quote, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be open to you. That's number one. That should be the number one thing that spiritualists and people that want to grow focus on, is that you, regardless of what you want, if you knock on the door, it's going to come to you. And so whether that's, you don't have to follow, a specific path, or you can come from, a simple realization when you're in the rain in a forest. It can come from a studied book. It can come from an ancient text, That's just the way this universe works. And starting from that point, I think, is crucial, which I think, we've sort of had that benefit from in the West.
Yeah, I haven't really dived down this topic with you, but I'm like, oh, spark my curiosity.
That's just Menergy.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, if you want answers, you have to ask questions. It's not just going to fall on your head. Although if you're not asking for long enough, then something might hit you on the head to get you to ask questions. Maybe it works like that. I don't know,
Right. Well, I think you can either you can either knock on the door, or eventually the door's going to knock on you.
Right.
So we'll add that to the bumper sticker list.
Yes. We've got a long list happening over here now.
That's right.
So you and I, we traveled to India last year, and we worked at a retreat together, and by far one of my most memorable travel experiences. And
great fun.
You accompanying me there, actually, to be honest, I don't think I would have gone if it wasn't having you accompany me. I was a bit like, I hadn't traveled in a while, and just, I've set myself up, as you would know, in my own little bubble, and to do that was a big stretch. And I feel that
big step. Like the
So,
mean
and then,
streets of Jaipur from from the forested streets of Upway.
right. And so, we had such a magical time, so many, great and very funny memories. But I think the beautiful thing that we sort of collaborate really well on, because we were specifically working with people on twin flame or divine partnership journeys and helping them progress through, where they're at in their own process.
Yep.
And I think, we did get a lot of good feedback, the fact that we work really well in tandem.
We did, yeah, that's right. That's right.
The way the scheduling worked, I think they saw you first and then me, or I can't remember now.
The way around.
It was the other way around, okay.
Yeah. The feedback I got was that in combination we were fantastic because you made them feel really good and an immediate, and I helped them maintain that and get the sort of tools to level up rather than just go sort of back to their old habits.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you remember. My memory's like a fish these days.
Well, other timelines, different setups,
And so, I think that's one of the beautiful things that we pondered, and we like these conversations that have literally been years in the making, because every time I have an idea, every time I have a pondering, every time I have a massive question, or I'm going through a big trigger fest, you are pretty much the person that I go to. And I'm very grateful for our connection, the fact that you live so close. And, occasionally we can have Mexican food at hand and things like that.
Yep.
And beautiful forest to walk in. And, a lot of the times I love the fact that we, obviously, the work that I do is heavily involved in people on a divine partnership journey. And I'm a big seeker and always have been, to understand things, as best I can. And I've always been like scratching on a theory, as I call it, and then I'll come to you and we bounce really well off each other. And I think that's been something that the conversations over the years, I was like, oh, I wish we had recorded this. And guess what? Now we are literally recording this. So
there you go. It happened. You see it, believe it, achieve it.
But I just want to bring in, because I remember a conversation that we had many years ago, and you were talking about a particular individual who you had come across or followed teachings of. And let's sort of go down that path, because I know we want to talk about like the ongoing conversation that we have about the differences and the similarities between the masculine and the feminine pathway towards ascension. And a lot of the great content that I put out is based around conversations that we have. So I want to give you credit where credit is due, but do you want to start off by sharing a little bit about, is it Ed? I did write it down.
Yeah, no. So there's a famous spiritual teacher called Nisargadatta Maharaj back in the 40s or so in India. Very, very awakened, very non-dual, but very dry. Extremely, basically, he says, this is how it is. That's it. And you're expected to sort of meditate upon that, get to that stage, and he's right, but it's not necessarily the most helpful thing. And so one of his, I suppose you'd call disciples or followers and stuff, started a lineage in America, quite successfully. Had quite a few enlightened and awakened individuals, as well as himself, obviously. And his name was Robert Adams. And so one of his disciples, a fellow called Ed Musica, he's still on Facebook. He's alive, and he runs a shelter for cats, actually, I think in California. So I've sort of been reading his stuff for a while, being sort of into the non-dual thing, and it was very interesting to sort of see him go from. Basically his story is he learned how to sort of meditate properly and to sort of do whatever techniques that they do. That's not important, but he essentially spent 10 years or 15 years or so in a camper van in the woods, just in bliss. Sort of like that sort of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle and his sort of
Mm-hmm.
2 years on a park bench.
Yes. Yeah.
Very similar to that. Very
Yep.
similar to that. Like he just spent, like he would stare at a wall just lying in his bed all day and feel amazing, feel bliss from that. But he started teaching and had what's called satsang, which is where you sort of sit down with your teacher and he delivers a lecture and you ask questions and so on, sort of like a question and answer meditation. And he started teaching that in California as well, and he fell in love with one of his students who also reciprocated. And suddenly he has this contrast of the dry 15 years of meditation, book learning type of spirituality, and this incredibly intense, immensely energetic energy work sort of based stuff. And his conclusion, I can send you through a quote or something if I find it, but his conclusion was, he achieved more in 6 months of dealing with this massive influx of love and energy and so on than he did in spending 15 years meditating in a monastery. And so he's a very sort of, I would say, outspoken advocate of, teachers and students essentially being able to be in relationships with each other in that community, because he's achieved so much for that and so much for his I don't think they got married, but his partner in that regard. So he's the sort of the words I use to describe it would be the in many cases like the masculine perception of this energetic spirituality that I know obviously you're heavily involved in is sort of like looking at a circus through a locked door. You can sort of see that there's stuff out there, but you're sort of very much removed from it, and you can't really perceive it very much. Like a lot of that stuff just doesn't translate very well, and that's been my experience. That's been the experience of a few other men that I've spoken to about this, but crucially, obviously not everyone. So there's there's hope for us yet, but basically that's sort of the default. That's the best that we can come up with as a default sort of male viewpoint when it comes to a lot of these sort of energies and a lot of this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. That poses such an interesting question, and I love it. This is making my mind tick. But this has just flown into my head, and I was like, I wonder whether that 10, 15 years of traditional teachings that he went through prepared him for, to be able to experience a love bliss bubble. Sometimes we call in the community, but like that real energetic, collaborative expansion that happens through two souls coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually raises a very interesting point. Like he went through the 15 years of teachings. I would say that definitely would have prepared him very much so. But from memory, his girlfriend didn't. She simply came into it, and within, I suppose, 6 months or so, obviously he can't tell what she was feeling, but he was thinking that there was a reciprocal feeling there. So she's come into it come into that sort of energetic thing at a much higher level as a default setup.
It really speaks volumes at how we're kind of energetically made up, doesn't it, really? Or how the soul path wants to unfold, because I have this theory that some people are more relationship, well, we spoke, I don't need to tell you this, you know this full well, but for people watching, that there is that the different paths towards ascension, and one is individual focused, which is more traditional Eastern type practice and philosophy, and then there's like the essential partner dynamic of the focus on other, like, and you can even break it down in like people who are introverted and extroverted, people who get their bounce or energy off activations through another person, another soul, and then the
sure.
person who goes through that internal process on their own, does it switch around, you know?
That's a great point. I think it does. And I think that when it does happen, people aren't really prepared for it. So what by that I mean, you would have let's say a 17 or 20-year-old boy who's not really that comfortable with emotions and sort of feeling all that sort of energy, falling in love for the first time and just being completely overwhelmed by the sort of the strength of all the feelings, not having the tools to really deal with it, and not really having the support network to sort of say, all right, you're feeling this. Yes, it's fantastic, but don't let it get to your head, so on and so forth. And so, well, I can't sort of, I'm not sure if there's an equivalent for females going the other way, but
Well, I just thought of one, yeah.
different.
Well, I was just thinking, like, on my own journey, I would say that I'm very much a relationship based, whether it's for triggering and purification or if it's activation or whatever, through my connection with people is what elevates me and what, evolves my own process. Hugely reliant on other people to guide me through that process, or path me or walk with me, let's say. And I know that I talk about in divine partnership how the spiral relationships have, there's a lot of different theories out there, but obviously one relationship will lead you to the next level of frequency, and it kind of spirals up until you get to that point where you can come into alignment with the highest potential partner of this lifetime, whether you call it a twin or whatever you want it, but it's I call it the highest potential vibrational match.
Right.
And so that's been very much my journey. But I think about the pause in my journey, right? 2016, that year shall never be mentioned. No, I'm actually at peace with it now. But obviously that was my very dark night of the soul, and you really heavily supported me through that time. And, say it here publicly, like, you saved my life many times. And I was just thinking about that and how I went from that to then having to really go within. And it was during that year that I realized how much growth I needed to do and how much I needed to take the reliance off other people, for different reasons. But I have experienced both to some level,
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, and a really, really good example of exactly what I mean, for sure. Just having that self-reliance and that sort of, I suppose, you would call it almost like an individual focus, or even like an object focus as well.
Yeah.
Very much as sort of the sort of the masculine path, and I think dealing with both of those pathways is crucial for spiritual development.
Yeah.
In real terms, like, obviously you can sit in a monastery, you can simply focus on one thing, but I've never really sort of put much stock in that, because as soon as you go out of that environment, you put in the marketplace, you put with people shoving you, stealing from you, or whatever would happen, you're not equipped to deal with that. And so the rough and tumble, I think, of everyday life is probably a better way of doing things.
More accelerated, I guess. Potentially.
That's it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when you can get hit with innumerable tsunamis of debt or money loss or family loss or this or that, if you renounce everything, you don't really have that option. So
yeah, we know all that journey so well.
Yes, that's right.
But I think another point, I've just had a flashback of one of our long walks and conversations, and how we were talking about for women, more typically it's very much based around romantic relationships and partnerships, and for men that the same equivalent is tied up in their success.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's sort of my thoughts on it, is that sort of the central drama that occupies our lives as women is, it's he loves me not, And for men, it's I'm failing, I'm succeeding, I'm failing, I'm succeeding. And that's sort of the twin poles by which our lives flow.
Mm.
And I really can't see, I can't see a hole in that. I think, well, no, I qualify that that's sort of the standard masculine energy versus feminine energy. And, there's plenty of guys and girls out there on the opposite part of the spectrum that have that. What's interesting is that there's very little in the middle.
Mm.
Everyone has one of those dramas because that's one of the key strings that their higher selves use to push and pull us around for our own benefit, of course.
Yeah. I'm evaluating myself to the shit right now. I'm like, oh. No, I was thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, definitely, like, he loves me, not the drama. 100% right. I can identify that, throughout various stages of my life. But I was like, the success thing too, Yeah. And I was like, maybe not so much these days, but like back in the day, it would be like, if the relationship and the man thing was, it would be the success. I'd just go from one to the other. I guess I was exercising my masculine and feminine polarities, wasn't I?
Absolutely. I mean, we have both within us. Otherwise, we couldn't function. Yeah. And so that's, I suppose, one of the benefits of being more of a balanced, having both relatively strong masculine and feminine, is that you can get pulled around by both strings. And, it's not necessarily easier, but it's faster.
Right?
It's the max power way of spirituality. It's the wrong way, but it's fast.
Yeah, I'm all about the fast way. Fastest way.
That's it. Just tear off the Band-Aid.
Yeah. I guess we've hit on a few things, and I think this is going to platform into so many amazing, great conversations, because I know I want to chat to you about, the parallels that we've come up with in terms of like divine partnership, twin flame, and different texts like the law of one and things like that. And I definitely want to bring all that into, the stuff that we've stumbled across over the years has been mind-blowing, to say the least. And the amount of times you or I have woken up to a text like, bro, you've got to take a look at this.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's just another example of us, I suppose, knocking and the universe sort of giving forth, really. There's heaps of great stuff out there. Like you mentioned, the law of one, which we can go into. But I do want to touch on something too, just before we leave that, the subject is that with the twin flame or the divine partnership, are you ready for some secret knowledge? Are you ready to drop a knowledge?
Bring it. I
don't know if I should. It's pretty hardcore, pretty esoteric.
I'm all ears. I'm all eyes.
So one thing that's interesting and that's hard for a lot of people to realize is that there's a stage sort of beyond the perfect relationship, and that's the perfect love of self. Relationships sort of by their nature are what you would call probably self-negating, in the sense that if your triggers and his triggers should match or should have a thing, because that's the purpose of being in a relationship, which is to help each other spiritually evolve and work through things. But once you get to that stage where there's not much more to work on and you're scraping the bottom of the barrel and things...
We've scraped the bottom of the barrel many times. Also, we thought.
That's right. Exactly. There's always more. But you get to a stage of sort of self-love and a stage of completion where, how do I put it? There's sort of a phrase, we can put this on the bumper sticker thing, which is real love is anathema to relationships. And by that, it's that you know, you have so much love for someone that you don't necessarily want to be with them. You just want to see them succeed and become amazing and great. And there's no need to sort of possess. There's no need to stick together with someone because, you know that they're perfect in every way. You know that you're perfect in every way. You know that they'll be cared for. They're in a completely perfect growth environment. They've got their higher self looking out for them, you know, as do you. And so there's that, you almost lack that magnetic attraction because love gets in the way. And that's sort of not, there's Lester Levinson, one of my personal heroes and spiritual teachers and so on. He terms it, he's the originator where I read this and where I sort of matured the concept. And he's sort of saying that all relationships are spiritual by nature. I lost my thought there. Damn it, right in the middle of the goods part.
Just blank slate you right there.
You did. Well,
sorry. No.
That's all right. That's must be where spirit wants me to stop.
No, but I do agree with you, and like coming at it from all the different angles, you know, the nature of let's call it, you know, strong soul connections, whatever that is, it really is a catalyst for us to evolve, to remember who we are. And I think beautifully what you were saying is that you get to that point of love without attachment, like that pure unconditional love that you just want the best for them and whatever that looks like, and vice versa. Yes. I think that's the ultimate goal, right? To get to on our own.
You said it better than I could.
And I was just going to say, like, that's the ultimate goal, and you get there and you are in that beautiful space of really wanting nothing but just to be of service, or whatever is driving you, whatever your purpose or mission or beingness is at that moment, because it does change. And it's generally then when the relationships align. It's that age old thing. But that's
a great point. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. It defines and splits what we think as love as humans, which is, almost like you could negatively term it ego possession almost, which obviously that takes it too harsh. But essentially, if someone cheats on you, someone steals from you, beats you, robs you, whatever, and that affects the way that you love them, then you never really loved them at all. Like, there was never really that love. It was very much a possession or ego-oriented sort of thing. And we can take that in 1,000 different ways, but essentially there's that, like you said, love with that attachment. That's the highest of the high. And Lester Levinson was asked, so what's it like, you're not in a relationship, but you love everyone. He says, well, imagine feeling the deepest love and appreciation for one person and then multiply it by 6 billion. So. Wow.
Yeah, totally. And I totally get that. And I think I said this to you not so long ago. I'm sure, we were walking and I was like, I was going through a bit of a rough time in that moment. And I was like, I just want to get back to that place where I can feel love for everything again. Because I know it's possible, because I've been there, And so I think it's beautiful when you are able to experience that. And obviously you dip and you go back to the bottom of the barrel and roll around in the mud for a bit.
That's exactly right.
But at least you know that it's possible, and you have a benchmark to get to that place, or accept beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing too. Once you know that it's possible, once you've felt it for a little bit, that's when you can really set it as a goal, and then you can sort of seek again, and it will come back to you. But so that's an interesting thing that I suppose I haven't really seen much of in the Twin Flame or Divine Partnership community, is that the whole goal obviously is to love yourself, and I think that's the goal for a lot of spirituality. But the relationship path is, it's especially prominent because you can't ignore it. Like you've sort of said so many times over the years that you can't push away this kind of relationship. You can't push away this love, and that's because essentially it's the root of it all is self-love, because that's our goal. And when I say self, I mean the big self, everything, the absolute. Just to sort of to bring us back, I definitely feel that there's that relationship path, very feminine oriented, feminine energy people. Is there a word for feminine energy people? Let's just call it females. Females have a much greater adaptation and just dive into that sort of pathway, like a fish to water, which is great.
And I just want to say another thing that's flown into my head before we wrap up. Like you in so many ways have been such a teacher to me and a guide to me. And I can think of so many examples. And back to what I was saying about how 2016 I had to really learn about the individual pathway. Mm-hmm. And you were a big mentor and presence and guide for me to do that, to give me the space to do that. But going back even further, you were the first person to introduce me to feminine, masculine energies within. And I'll never forget, it was both when we were working in our corporate jobs and we met for coffee one day, and you told me that I was too masculine and I needed to embrace my feminine energy. And honestly,
it takes a special kind of jerk to really.
No, you said it much more eloquent than that. I'm just recapping, but which led into a beautiful, and I actually took that on board, and I actually went and I did things and I adapted things, and it gave me such great insight into my own behaviors. Whoa, there's something going on with it. I don't know if you can see all the
I felt it as well.
And I'm like, it was almost like there was a spacecraft. Never mind. It was almost like a mini spacecraft hovering. Where was I?
Masculine, feminine. Yeah, look, I'm really happy that worked out well, because, blurting out, hey, you should wear skirts more.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I think that's sort of where the conversation was prompted or started. And it was like, I didn't even realize until you brought that awareness to me that I have an aversion. I still do, but I kind of work through it. But, it's winter. I'm comfortable right now. But I've always had such an aversion to wearing like girly clothes or skirts or dresses. It was always very much because I worked in corporate for a long time. It was like suits and,
Right. Exactly. Well, that's That's one of the things that I sort of would train myself to notice, is that the masculine and feminine balance is incredibly important. And it's not just feeling girly, feeling manly or whatever. It's actually, all of these things stem from energetic, I suppose, an energetic reality, where if you're a female and you're in the corporate world, you're having to suppress so much of the natural instincts that you have. You really coat your chakras with this masculine energy, and that's a huge problem, because you then you output the wrong energy, and thus sort of go for the wrong person, go for the wrong man, because you don't know yourself. But there's almost like this magnetic polarity where, women that have that masculine energy around them and don't understand why, it's like, I'm unhappy, but I can't change it. I don't know why. I don't understand. And that's just sort of almost the worst thing, because you see that sort of, especially in sort of corporate women and stuff. I've got all this success. I've got all this money. I go on a vacation to Fiji twice a year. Why aren't I happy? And it's just purely because it's like wading through toxic sludge and sort of coating your whole body in that sort of thing. Not toxic, obviously, but like mud, let's say. And sort of you see the same thing as well, unfortunately, in most men. especially, I suppose, younger men who have grown up in sort of female-dominated school system, know maybe the parents have divorced, they don't really have a good masculine role model, and they go into university, also female dominated, and they just don't they have to cut so much of themselves out and coat their masculine, essentially their masculine polarized chakras in feminine polarized energy. It just becomes this hard crystal, like that's sort of the whole phenomenon of the nice guys, you know, where they don't know what they want, they don't know who they are, and it's a literal energetic crystallization that well, I saw you going down that path, and I'm like, no, not on my watch, bucko.
No, I was having a great revelation about that. I was just thinking about, you know, back in my early days and like dating, like working in the corporate world and dating, and obviously having very strong masculine energy, I believe anyway, to fit in, to keep up with that world. And so I would be attracted to men who I would look at and that they would seem very masculine to look at them. But repeatedly I would get to know, like I would have this persona of them or this perception of them just by looking at them, thinking, wow, they're really sort of masculine looking. And then as I would approach them and get to know them, they would actually be very soft and feminine. But I can see how now that was bringing in a balance, right? Because we were both, you know, masking the opposite. Yeah.
Yep. And if you got into a relationship with any of them, you would sort of have this sort of adequate, acceptable relationship where you hit all the milestones, but just doesn't feel right. And there will be this nagging thing inside you.
Yeah, so, and I'm sure they could say the same about me. You know, maybe I look super feminine, and they're like, "Whoa," and then they're like, "What the fuck? She's really."
yeah. And then they sort of act out, or they, you know, do all sorts of stupid stuff, but just not realizing why. Like they don't have that vocabulary to sort of not only voice but also process a lot of these things.
Yeah. And I
which
guess
is unfortunate. And ironically, where I learned that was sort of trying to you remember that old book, The Game, where you have the pickup artists and stuff, and they all go out to nightclubs. That was great. Remember the 2000s? But that's sort of that sort of thing prompts a lot of introspection, and that community and everything had a lot of really good things going for it in terms of learning about that energetic dynamic.
So fascinating. We can just dive right.
Hey?
We can just dive right in. I think this is going to follow on. So I really want to encourage people to, you know, what has this conversation brought up for you? What questions have you got? What are you kind of seeking through? What can we continue on this dialogue and this conversation and open up some Pandora's boxes? I don't know where that goes.
No, that could be great actually. If you have if people want to submit a question or a topic or something they'd like for us to talk on, that'd be cool.
Yeah, beautiful. And I guess just to close off, you know, does anything come to mind for you about, you know, people dealing with? Obviously, there's a lot of discussion at the moment about how the masculine are going through really abrupt awakenings, and there have been for years. But, you know, what advice or suggestions could you give to perhaps women who may have a man in their life, whether it be a partner or a child or a father or a brother or a friend who is maybe in their dark night of the soul or going through an abrupt awakening, how to approach that, like, from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, that's a great question, and that's something that I think we could talk about for literal years. But one thing to remember is that the first rule of any interaction should be compassion. You should always sort of have that as a background, because it's so easy to think, it's so easy to compare, you know, essentially your highlight reel with their behind the scenes. Maybe I've got the wrong one around the wrong way. But what I'm getting at is that you see the action, you don't see what's going on behind,
right.
And what's going on within. And so a lot of men grow up and sort of are thrust into this world with no real support, with no real understanding, people around them, with no real compassion from everyone. Like, you're basically told to sort of man up and just be stoic. And that just comes from a lot of places. And so the last thing you really want to do is perpetuate that. I suppose understand also that it's like the man in your life has been lifting weights in a suit in the mud. And so you're going to have to excuse some dirtiness, some stink. There's going to be some stink. And so, you need to have a lot of compassion, a lot of patience, I think, is rule number one, because there's a lot of hardship going on behind the scenes that I think it's pretty much impossible for women to really understand. And I'm sure there's reverse examples, vice versa, but it's a very literal sense. Well, I've always sort of thought of it like men and women both experience the same emotional seas, but women have a much larger boat to deal with things. And so when that storm comes, the man gets tossed around a lot. The man gets sort of thrust into these situations that literally there's no tools to deal with the emotions and feelings that come up. And he's still expected to sort of to lead and to be in charge and to do all that sort of thing. And I sort of sound like I'm sort of saying that shouldn't be the case, which is not. That's not the case at all. It's the case that a healthy you can't sort of expect a healthy masculine in such a sick society, in such a sick sort of not sick, but such a dense set of circumstances.
Yeah, especially this year and everything that's going on. It's
right.
Really breaking down that old patriarchal, as we call the old masculine template, is dissolving. And, I think that there's a lot of men that are, in the thick of that and going through it for the greater good, to transmute that. So compassion, understanding, patience. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. But, and also I think there's almost like a dark night of the soul, or that we have to go through society-wide, in the sense that once you've gone through and cleared stuff out, you're going to become the best leader possible. You're going to become the most positive masculine possible, and obviously vice versa with feminine. And so it's the compassion, understanding, and support while going through that process is going to come out at the other end and be like, phenomenally awesome, just like me. No, but that's sort of like, great men are made, they're not born.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a great quote around that, but I think that's a beautiful note to leave it off at, to wrap it up in the sense that, it's all for a purpose, it's all for a reason.
Yeah.
And, there are many men and women who are going through, intense hardship of this year, but that is the cornerstones of the making of the new amazing version of them that will become the new generation of leaders and way showers.
Yep, absolutely.
Lachie, I can't thank you enough, bro. Thank you so much for...
Thank not me, thank the one that worked through me.
Famous quote. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation, and look forward to seeing your comments and any suggestions for next round. And we will be back with another episode of whatever we decide to call this.
Menergy work.
Menergy work. Much love. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.